eCapitol News Director Sean Ashley joins us with more on this week's activity at the Capitol. Sean, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Now, there was some last-minute drama over the criminal justice reform bill. What happened there?
Yeah, there had been a bill moving its way through the legislative process through most of the session that just came to a halt in about the last month, and that was House Bill 1269. This bill would allow those individuals who were convicted of minor drug offenses and some minor property crimes an opportunity to get out of prison as a result of the passage of State Question 780, which moved those crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. Now, lawmakers have haggled throughout the session about exactly how to do it. This bill came up with a commutation process and also included an expungement component, but it seemed like it wasn't going to be heard in the Senate. On the last day, on Thursday, there were two Senate Republican caucus meetings where they were talking about this bill, and then finally it was one of the last measures taken up. It passed 34 to 11. 11 Senate Republicans voted against it, and the bill now goes to the governor, who back in May said he supported this very kind of idea.
Right. This was one of Governor Stitt's priorities, the criminal justice reform bill. How did it shake out?
Well, various people will tell you there were some victories and there were some losses. On the victory side, there was House Bill 1269 itself and the opportunity for from 500 to 800 individuals to be released from prison. There was also legislation which allows for individuals who have a criminal conviction to still obtain a professional license or certification from the state, as long as that criminal activity was not directly related to that type of license or certification. These were victories and things the governor had supported. On the other side of the fence, though, there were proposals like bail reform, which would eliminated the need for bail for minor offenses and kept it in place for the more serious offenses that in the end ended up failing in the House. Proponents of criminal justice reform say that they'll be back. The governor, for his part, has formed a task force to watch the implementation of the various reforms that have been passed, and there's also work continuing on sentencing reform.
So stay tuned on that.
Exactly.
Also, I mean, this has been going on for years. There's bad blood between the legislature and the Ethics Commission. What's the latest on that?
Well, there were a couple of moves this year by the legislature that probably do not sit well with the Ethics Commission. The first was a change in which the way the agency is funded. Previously, it had relied on the fines and fees it collected going into its revolving fund for some of its operations. This year, the legislature chose to cap that fund and put that money in the general revenue fund and then appropriate part of that back to the agency. The other issue was the rules amendments, which had been approved by the commission and sent to the legislature. The legislature this year chose to disapprove those changes, as they can do, citing that one of the problems was that one of the main changes was a cooling off period, which would prevent legislators and agency heads, once they leave service, from becoming a lobbyist for 2 years.
Now, with the session, it's essentially over right now. What happens next?
Well, what happens next is we wait a week, essentially, until May 31st at 5 p.m. for the legislature to formally adjourn sine die. They sort of adjourn provisionally, and that will take place on the 31st. In the meantime, Governor Stitt needs to sign those last 80 or so bills which are sitting on his desk. On Friday, the governor signed the General Appropriations Bill, House Bill 2765, so agencies know what their budgets are going to be, but he still has a fair amount of work to do before he's done with this session.
Always a pleasure. Sean Ashley, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.